Also joining us in studio is Heather Bakken. She is a freelance writer, photographer, social justice advocate. And here's a word at the end of the sentence I don't think we've had on a descriptor in a long time, since Larry King, maybe. Agnostic. I love it. I'm glad you're here. And just that word I want to hunker down on just for a second. Agnostic. Andrew, would you still call yourself a Christian?
I would absolutely call myself a Christian. I have to say the most healing thing that I've been able to do is, through this process, I've actually been able to say, I was actually asked in court, do you hate these people? And I actually can say no, I don't. I've actually explored a lot of this. I've spoken to former members of the cult. They've told me that former members of the cult tell me that most of the staff at Grenville were abused themselves as children. I was even told that about Father Charles Farnsworth himself. These were incredibly damaged people. It was a school run by misfits and sadists.
Okay, so Heather, in your case, though, you went to a Christian school, and because of your experience there, you have backed away from the faith stuff because of your experience there?
Correct.
So does it make your head turn to one side when you hear of people who have experienced the same lot of rubbish that you and Andrew have experienced and stayed in the faith? Does your head turn to the side a little bit and go, really?
No, I think everybody has the right to decide what gets them out of bed in the morning, what motivates them to do good. I thought Latanya was just an outstanding human being, listening to her. And to see her face, I saw her before she came in here, and she does exude joy. And I envy her the ability to work around the harm that was caused in her life by someone who professed to be a person of faith. I think it's really hard to discern who is actually of faith and who has a lust for power. And our experience, I think Andrew and I have shared this experience by going to this school. The people who were heading this school were not necessarily people of faith. They had a lust for power, and they had an appetite for material gains. So it was all about money to them. So we weren't misguided by people who were perhaps had a solid religious foundation. We were misguided by people who crawled out of a swamp and wanted to take advantage of kind of I think it was almost trendy after the 60s, after you had free love and kind of the spiritedness that went on with the hippie era. After that, there was I think people craved structure. So you note a lot of cults popped up after that. We got Scientology. We had things speckled across the country, and I think the Bereans and later the people at Grenville and the Community of Jesus needed that. It was the pendulum swung too far to the other side, so they needed that structure, and they needed to be told what to do. And I think for me, I'm kind of in the Christopher Hitchens school of consciousness, which is the independent mind lies not in what it thinks, but in how it thinks. So By
the way, that was a brilliant sociological analysis.
Oh.
No, it was. You touched on so many things that I have to interrupt you.
Okay.
It's too hard for me to maintain this stuff, or to retain this stuff. The people that want power, and the people that wanted possessions, I think you were talking about those two aspects. Yeah. I see that a lot. I've been involved in the Jesus scene for 30-plus years. And the happy-clappy preachers that come up and preach prosperity doctrine, they want both. They want to be worshipped, and they would never admit that, but they want the power. And they also want the possessions. And you can't be a poor prosperity preacher. Otherwise, you're not preaching the right prosperity. You got to have stuff. And so I've seen people who wouldn't normally succeed in real life crawl into ministry in order to get the same things, power and stuff. And I just feel so sorry for them because, again, from a sociological point of view, they're outsiders still. They're not achievers. They're not overcomers. They simply are taking advantage of selling hope. And
this is why you can't have any empathy or sympathy for them.
No.
Because they victimize people. So they're insecure, they have their issues, and instead of finding compassion with people, there are common human traits that we all have. And everybody has a breaking point. And instead of using faith to help other people, they want to own it all themselves. It's almost like another story of Faust. I think what you've said is exactly true. We have the Ted Haggards of the world. When I was at school. It was Jim and Tammy Baker. And what they do, and I think Latanya also pointed this out, these people target vulnerable people. And when you're Andrew,
people that need to buy hope.
Yes. Or in our case, there were 3 types of students at the school. The children of the community of Jesus who had no way out because their parents had bought into it and had drank the Kool-Aid.
I would feel the worst for them.
Yes. They suffered immeasurably because there really was no light at the end of the tunnel. Then there is a second group, and what unbeknownst to me, and Andrew can speak for himself, I did not realize at the time, but Grenville was also marketing itself to children with behavioral issues. So, for instance, when I was there, Tommy Hunter's son was there because he had done a few things that probably wouldn't be criminal now. But
he just did a few things a little while ago that weren't. Anyway, sorry.
So he, the judge was going to send him to a juvenile detention center, right. And Tommy had heard about this place and said, "Can you just give him one last shot here?" Now, I'm in Andrew school. I have a British background. Private school was something. I mean, my dad's Norwegian, and he's all about social justice, and he's the one who gave me a voice and that independent, a sense of curiosity and wonder. But my mother came from a place where, and he always said, I never understand the British women. They can't wait to have children all their life, and as soon as they do, they can't wait to ship them off to boarding school. So,
hold on, Andrew, do we get an amen?
I have to say that my parents fell into the category of the frozen chosen,
yes.
When it came to, Anglican and Presbyterian was our background in Scotland. Right. And so, like I said, very frozen chosen, not demonstrative, and hands-off.
But this was also a privilege and an opportunity in our parents' eyes.
Yeah.
This is, you're going to get a top-notch education. For me, it was my graduating year. My dad had noticed my marks had dropped because I was bored at school, and I needed some kind of motivation. And a private school is the best place to get more, someone kind of saying, look, here's challenging you intellectually. And then the next thing was he wanted me to go to an Ivy League school. And I certainly had the SAT results to be able to get into them. But this was so traumatizing. I went back to public school for grade 13, and I was completely lost that year.
Wow.
And that's the impact these people had.
What happened to you?
What happened to me? So, the first day I was there, I realized there was something incredibly wrong.
The first day?
The first day. Because I arrived and there were all these polite young men who offered to take your bags, and you'd think that's just a nice custom. Actually, it wasn't. They had an ulterior motive. They went in, they searched your bags. So after that, so your parents leave, you go into this big refectory where there was a banner on the wall, and this really struck me. And anyway, the banner said, "Humiliation is a place of entire dependence upon God." And I understood humility as a concept.
That's totally different.
Yes, but I thought, did they get that wrong? Did someone do a typo there? I didn't really think about it again. Then they had this kind of thunderous Bible-thumping welcome back, and I looked at all these kids, and it just wasn't normal behavior in my mind from being at public school.
Sort of a Stepford Wives,
yes,
children
exactly.
of the corn kind of thing?
Exactly. And so, I was looking around to see if anybody else was like me, thinking this was a bit strange. And I'd say 3/4 of the student body were all in there fist pumping, and then I locked eyes with someone across the table. We are still friends, and we were like deers in the headlight. We thought, this is bizarre. Then we shuffled back to our rooms, and my bags weren't there. When they finally arrived, someone had clearly rifled through them, had taken all my blue jeans, and had confiscated my clock radio, my tape recorder, and all my Beethoven tapes. I was obsessed with Beethoven at that point. I play the viola, so I didn't have anything and I loved rock music, but I just didn't have rock music tapes. So I said to a teacher, some of my items are missing, and without missing a beat, we had to confiscate some items. And I said, why? And she said, well, blue jeans are the sign of the devil. By the way, people in North Korea are not allowed to wear blue jeans because it's a sign of Western values.
Yeah. I'm surprised you all didn't have to have the same haircut at Grenville.
Well, the boys did, and the girls dressed the same. So there's this kind of this group think that you see in everything from a totalitarian regime to what Latanya was talking about in a smaller church. We had, I think, around 200 students, and then plus the staff, plus the community. So we're talking about several hundred people here. At any rate, I noticed something was wrong. If they're going to confiscate, they confiscated my clock radio.
Well, the Beethoven is the thing that tips you off that there's something. I mean, come on, seriously, they're confiscating.
Exactly.
Who confiscates Beethoven?
I know. It's bizarre, and not having a clock radio because they didn't want you to listen to radio. So then I just knew there was something wrong, and then I also experienced the light sessions, and the person who tore me out of bed in the middle of the night is Julie Case, who is about to be ordained as a deacon.
If she gets ordained, will you show up?
I've thought about it.
Would she recognize you?
I don't know, because I don't think we were humans to them. I think what the structure of the church or that school that I saw was a classic example of how you victimize people and how you bully and harass them. You need a few things for that. One is you need the perpetrator. The perpetrators, when I were there, were the headmaster and his wife, the associate headmaster and his wife. Then you need enablers, the people or enforcers who support that. The enforcers and the enablers. So Julie Case to me was an enabler. She took me to them so I could have a light session. Then the majority of the people are passive bystanders. The people who have so much skin in the game that they're afraid to say anything. They turn a blind eye because either they'd be severed from their family, their livelihood is gone, there's no food on the table, or in the case of children, I'd say we were innocent bystanders. We could not. They were so effective at dissociating us from anyone else in the school, destroying. If you saw a friendship forming, for instance, that girl I locked eyes with, within a week I was told I could not talk to her, look at her. And I'm thinking, are you afraid of two 17-year-old girls? What could we possibly do that would threaten you? Well, now we know. We could expose the truth.
Okay, Heather, Andrew, as an outsider, this is what I've heard so far in regards to the abuse both of you suffered. You were pulled out of bed. You were drugged into these light sessions, and that means you were put up on stage. Is there an actual stage, or just in front of people?
In my case,
stage actually in the chapel. Yes, there was, and there was one in the dining room as well.
Mine was private in a den with these 4 people in the middle of the night who were drunk.
And jeez, and the point of these things was to chastise you for something, to
no, it's
demean
to scare you.
Actually, they stated their intentions when I was there. Don Farnsworth, the Dean of Men, actually stated it to us, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, but in retrospect, I see what he meant. He said, we're going to break you down and build you up the Grenville way.
Right.
I was told that history stops now. Okay, he said everything that happened before didn't happen. This is your beginning. This is your new birth.
All right.
Okay, just as the Soviets did in their system. This is totalitarian regime handbook stuff.
All right, let me bring up some scripture verses, Heather. I had to go back and look these up because it's been a while since I've
read a Bible.
Thanks, Tim. In regards to the public shaming that both of you experienced, we all realize it was ridiculous and so much more. It was cultic. It was abuse. We get it. We understand that. But from their point of view, maybe it came as a result of 1 Timothy 5, verse 19. Do not listen to an accusation against an elder unless it's confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. Those whose sin should be reprimanded in front of the whole church. This will serve as a strong warning to others. I can pretty much guarantee you that the community of Jesus took that verse and ran with it. Next one, Matthew 18. If another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you've won the person back. But if you are unsuccessful, take 1 or 2 others with you and go back to them again so that everything you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. If the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat that person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. Now, if you really understand the context there, what that means is you love them even more. But that's not quite how they took these scriptures. And then the final one is Galatians 6. Brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should, this is the verse they didn't get, gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. So what these folks did was take the verses that were for elders and churches, different churches that were spoken about, and manipulated it, turned it, like many Christians do, cherry-pick verses and fit them into their own agenda. So, again, as an outsider, I'm listening to this and thinking, well, really, now I understand why the OPP really didn't do anything, because unless someone came forward and said, I was sexually abused,
People did go.
We did. I was physically abused.
We did.
You were physically abused. Mm-hmm. So, Heather, what Can you share that?
Sure, but I'd just like to, if I could, just two things from what you just said, Drew.
Hold on. Can you summarize what you think I was trying to say? Because I'm not sure what I was trying to say.
Okay.
What do you think I was trying to say?